I'm here today with the author of the best-selling book, Sex at Dawn, Christopher Ryan. Chris, how are you doing today?
Good, except for the LA traffic.
Oh my gosh, are you getting completely swamped?
Every time I think I might want to live here, I just drive somewhere and I'm reminded why I don't.
Just run.
It kills me. I mean, there are great people here. I love all my friends in LA, but I just can't deal with this traffic.
Where are you living right now?
Well, we're staying in Topanga Canyon.
Okay.
Which we really like. But we were in Venice, and coming from Venice to here, even like, I thought 3 p.m. is like easy. No.
There is traffic at
nightmare.
Such random times because even I've gone anything on the 405 because the 405 randomly shuts down. I don't know if you've heard, there's a phenomenon called Gemzilla right now.
I've heard of Carmageddon.
It's similar to Carmageddon.
Right.
It's called Gemzilla, and it's going to be all this weekend.
Oh, good.
So if you're, I like how we have events in LA. Well, there's Carmageddon and there's Gemzilla. They're closing the freeway and making it from 5 lanes to 2 lanes.
Oh, sweet.
And it's going to be all weekend.
Yeah.
So you might want to plan to take a helicopter.
Yeah, or we'll just stay on a yacht.
Yes, your beautiful wife had a yachting accident.
We had a yachting accident. I know. She's got a yachting injury.
Hashtag first world problem.
Exactly. Slipping. We were going, what were we doing? We were going to go diving or something, and getting from the yacht to the tender, which is the boat that's on a yacht. We don't deserve sympathy for that. None of these yachts are ours, by the way, just to keep that clear.
They're borrowed yachts.
Yeah, well, they're friends' yachts. Even better.
And she's currently, I think, getting molested on the couch by my puppies.
Yeah.
So that's another first world problem. Your book, Sex at Dawn, and I've done a little bit of research. I haven't finished the book, so I'm not an expert yet. I'll have to have you back when I'm done. But the idea of non-monogamy is something that you talk about. The book is largely about the argument that our ancestors were very likely not monogamous and, in fact, relatively promiscuous. And I don't know if that's just relegated to our relatives or our ancestors, because I feel like most people believe in non-monogamy, but the logistics of it kind of make them not decide to do it. But I mean, the fact that the divorce rate in America is 60%?
Yeah, well, it depends how you measure it, but it's about half of all marriages end in divorce.
So about 60%. Now, I don't blame that on non-monogamy or monogamy. I think that a lot of people lack a great deal of emotional intelligence in general. But you're saying that we're not genetically programmed.
Right. I avoid terms like programming and what's natural and unnatural, and it's difficult to talk about these things without using these words, but as far as programming goes, or genetic imprinting, we're designed to be very flexible. So the argument against what we argue in the book would be, but we're designed to be flexible, so in some situations we're monogamous and others we're not, and blah blah blah. That's all true. But that's like saying, we've got a very flexible dietary capacity. So we're one of, most animals, you think of any animal, think of a dog. Dogs only eat meat, right? Dogs cannot graze on herbs and fruits and stuff, right? So people try to make their dogs vegetarians, essentially kill their dogs, right? Dogs are carnivores. And then think of rabbits. Rabbits can only eat grass and certain herbs. They can't eat animals, right? We can eat practically anything. Human beings are like rats and cockroaches. We can survive on almost anything, which explains why those 3 species are so successful, biologically speaking. So we're omnivores, right? And what we argue is that sexual monogamy is like vegetarianism. It's not that there's anything wrong with it. It just doesn't come naturally to our species. And so to make that argument, you have to look at our ancestors.
I totally agree with you. I feel like in our society, it's such a societal pressure. Like I think you talked about in one of the chapters I read, us putting our assumptions onto our ancestors, right? Our current modern day societal assumptions. But it seems like monogamy came out of the kind of Judeo-Christian religious system, or certain religious systems saying, because of certain morality and things like that. And I feel like like I said, most of the people I know, and these are not specifically crazy open-minded people, believe in non-monogamy, and they feel, I mean, and not just guys, because a lot of people say, well, you know, that's a guy thing, guys think this and that, and it's just that they don't know how to control their jealousy or their anger towards their spouse or significant other when they see them flirting or seeing them. Well, how would you, I guess what I'm asking is, how would you address that part of our emotional psychology, that the jealousy and the, I guess, because that could be an argument for monogamy, saying, well, if, you know, we're not supposed to be monogamous, why would, you know, my hubby get super jealous when I'm like flirting with a guy or whatever? Right.
Jealousy is an expression of insecurity, right? And so in as much as insecurity is part of human nature and part of animal nature in general, then it is a natural response. But why jealousy gets focused on the sexual life of another human being is another issue, right? I mean, you could say, look, dogs get jealous. Your dog's probably one gets jealous if you pay too much attention to the other. I think you just said that, right?
My dog Mitzi, as soon as you guys came in, she was like super jealous because you guys were giving Jamie attention.
Right. Okay. So in that sense, jealousy is obviously a very basic kind of response. But I don't think one of your dogs would really give a damn if the other one was having sex. You know,
she would probably sit there smiling, and panting,
to try to join in or something. So that's the issue we have to look at. Why is jealousy or this particular expression of insecurity related to the sexual behavior of someone else? Now, it's natural to be concerned about losing something that's important to you, right? But there's nothing that says that your partner or your friend having sex with another person means you're going to lose them. In fact, given the fact that many marriages dissolve because of sexual frustration, because somebody had an affair and the other person can't accept that, so they sacrifice the marriage on the altar of fidelity, it's actually a pretty good argument that marriages would be more stable if they were less exclusive.
Yes, I totally
Dan Savage makes that argument. You know?
You're preaching to the choir here.
Right. So even the perceived fear that, oh my God, if she has sex with someone else, I'm going to lose her. Well, maybe not, dude. Maybe you're going to lose her if you refuse to let her have sex with someone else.
What about the idea that, so if someone was in an open marriage, what would you recommend for, you know, would you recommend 100% open and honesty? So let me explain. So I've been in open relationships before, and I've had successful ones and non-successful ones. I was in an open relationship with a gentleman who was extremely jealous, and it was a total nightmare because
why would you have an open relationship with that kind of guy?
Well, I'm not with him anymore.
Yeah, but I mean, did he agree to have an open relationship?
I think in his kind of like delusional mind, because I've had, you know, I'm bisexual, he had this like male fantasy of like having threesomes and all this nonsense. You know what I mean?
Right.
So in his mind, I think he thought it was going to be this kind of like crazy sexual escapade, but I'm more leaning towards like a polyamorous thing, where it's an actual relationship, because I feel, and I've done polyamorous relationships, and it was quite actually a lot of work, which is why I don't know how people have, you know, these guys who are players who have 5 girlfriends. I don't know how the heck they do it, because dating multiple people on me was an emotional drain, and I would, confuse one person with the other. I was like, what's going on? Didn't you tell me that story last week? Oh, that was the other guy.
Yeah. That means the guys are hanging out if they're telling the same stories.
I wish they were hanging out. Actually, that would have saved me a lot of time and effort.
Yeah.
And actually, these polyamorous communities are popping up all over the place in Oregon, and, you know, in Portland and Seattle, and LA has a big polyamorous community. And there's a lot of weirdness and judgment, especially from the gay community, about it, because a lot of people will use the argument, well, if we let gays get married, what about multiple marriages? What about, you know, it's going to turn into this big nightmare, and what about the logistics of it? And first of all, I don't think that's a valid argument at all, because, you know, I don't have an issue with multiple marriages. If someone wants to marry their dog, I feel like it's a personal issue, and who the heck cares who the hell you marry? You know, there's a woman that died and left her entire inheritance to her cat. Who cares?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And but I guess, what is the logistics that you, doing the research that you have, think is the healthiest? Because I've been totally open and honest with people, and they have been, you know, like, hey, I don't want to know every detail, and then I kind of then feel dishonest or have been like, and then I know people that are in open marriages and they have certain rules like, oh, well, if my spouse is out of town, they can do whatever the heck they want, or et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, well, we don't really get into giving advice, not in the book and not in general. I try to avoid that. Because you never know what's going on in someone else's relationship, right? Even to sort of get into the head of a single person in a therapeutic context, it takes a long time. It takes a lot of study of that person, right? And so to get into the dynamics of someone else's relationship is, way out of my realm of expertise, especially people I don't know. And that kind of blanket advice by definition is for people you don't know. I think the only, as far as my advice giving goes, is what you were referring to, is being honest, being true to yourself, right? Some people see non-monogamy as a choice, talking about the homosexual world or the LGBT world. Other people see it as a sexual orientation. Some people say, I was born this way, it's the way I'll always be. And
monogamy or non-monogamy?
Non-monogamy,
non-monogamy.
Right? Or monogamy, right? Other people are that way. Other people say, I can't imagine ever being in a relationship that wasn't exclusive. I just couldn't do it, don't want to do it. Fine. Wherever you are, be there, but get it out on the table early. The thing that I think is a mistake is people who get into relationships under false pretenses, right? Whether it's, a guy who meets a woman who wants to have a kid in a couple of years, and the guy's like, and he knows he doesn't, but he's like, damn, she's hot, So I'll just pretend I do until the moment of truth, and then by then, who knows? Maybe she'll change her mind. Yeah, that's not the way to get into a relationship, And I think people are that way about monogamy too. Probably more men talk to me about these things than women, but I've heard a lot of men who are like, yeah, I'm not monogamous, man, but yeah, I'm married. Yeah, I don't know. I cheat. I don't think she'll ever catch me. I don't think she's really wants to. Like, that's all unspoken. What happens? You're assuming all these things about this person you live with. You have to at least have the conversation, I think.
I think it's a difficult conversation because I know when I told my husband that I didn't... Well, when we first got married, I told him that I didn't believe in monogamy, and he agreed. He said, I never really thought it was natural. But then the logistics of actually becoming non-monogamous, I think, kind of was like weird for him because he's grown up in a household. His parents have been married for over 30 years. His grandparents have been married for over 50 years. And so that's just kind of like out of the box for him. But again, I can't... It's kind of like religion, like a lot of people say, oh, well, I'm atheist or I'm agnostic. I don't believe anything. But then, they'll find an alternative religion that's not mainstream Christianity, or they'll discover Taoism or Buddhism, and they'll say, oh, actually, I think I'm kind of that.
Right. Or they get sick and then suddenly they are religious. Yeah. Oh, God. Thank you, God. Please, God. Yeah.
So I think that's the kind of same thing with non-monogamy. It's like a lot of people say, well, I don't really believe in monogamy, but then or I don't believe that one person is meant for another person, but then if their spouse were to kind of be like, oh, well, let's try this, I don't know that they would be open to it.
Sure, fair enough. I often think in terms of food, because I think sex and food are two things that are very arbitrary and culturally determined, and yet we very quickly assume that we have some sort of universal truth behind them, right? So we began Sex at Dawn talking about food and how in Korea, people eat dogs and it's completely normal. And then, you go to the States and that would be considered a criminal act, actually, right? Killing a dog and eating it. Whereas pigs, which are just as intelligent as dogs, maybe more intelligent, here, that's completely cool. And in other cultures, that would be a criminal act.
I don't know why you brought this up because I met...
Are you Korean?
I'm not.
No. All right.
No, I'm at mental odds with the whole pig thing because I absolutely love bacon, but I'm a huge pig lover.
Well, okay. The line I use in a lot of public speaking things is, that monogamy is like vegetarianism. It can be healthy, it can be moral, it can be blah, blah, blah. But just because you've decided to become a vegetarian doesn't mean bacon suddenly stops smelling good.
Exactly.
Right?
Bacon smells delicious, and I love, love, love pigs, and it's a really good metaphor because I don't know, it's so bizarre because I feel like you said in the beginning, it's kind of hard to give blanket advice because everyone's different. And I kind of, agree with that, especially with monogamy and sexuality in general, because you hear these certain things. So there's a stereotype men think about sex more than women, men are hornier than women, men want sex more than women. Yet I constantly hear all of my girlfriends saying, oh my God, I'm not getting laid enough. My hubby's not paying attention to me enough. My boyfriend's not paying attention to me enough. I'm way hornier than him. What's wrong with him? All he does is sit and play video games. But then I hear the opposite, and then I hear, you know, I don't know. I just hear so many different things. I know women that never have sex. They'll have sex once a month, a couple times a year. And then I know women who they weren't molested, they weren't raped, they're not sexually hypersexual stimulated for any reason at all. They're just, you know, normal. And they, you know, are staring at men just like men stare at women.
Yeah, men and women are, I think it's nonsensical to talk about who's hornier or who's this or who's that. I think that's one of the big mistakes of evolutionary psychology is trying to generalize about male sexuality versus female sexuality with too much enthusiasm, because there are very limited things you can actually say that are nearly universal about men.
So generalizing 3.5 billion people into one category.
It's tough, yeah. I mean, one of the things I think is a safe thing to say is that women have greater erotic plasticity than men do. And what that means is that women's sexual response is more likely to be shaped by the situation, whether that be the cultural situation, you know, how much she's had to drink, whether she's ovulating or not. Seriously.
I'm glad you're explaining this to me, because I didn't know what that word meant. I didn't even know what a novel was, Chris.
Well, this is going to be very educational. So women are, you know, when they give a bunch of questionnaires to, you know, undergraduates and, you know, Psych 101 class. And
depends on if they've had wine.
Yeah, none of them have had wine. That's the problem. You know, it's 8 a.m. They're sitting under fluorescent lights.
Like, I'm not horny at all.
Right. Like the women are just like, I want to get out of here. Whereas the men are kind of what they are. And they're always that way. And when they're younger, it's like, okay, turbocharged. But it's still the same energy. Right. So with women, I think this is one of the problems in research, that men give a pretty standard, predictable response to a lot of things, a lot of these questions. Whereas women, you never know. Like you ask a woman in her Psych 101 class, you know, what's the ideal number of lovers for you to have in your lifetime? Right. The classic response, typical response is like 3 to 5 is what American undergraduate women will say. Right. But then catch up with that woman 15 years later when she's in her mid 30s. Ask her again. I'll bet she's not still saying 3 to 5, right?
I want to talk about this sexual research. First of all, yes, she's not saying 3 to 5.
Because she blew through 3 to 5 like 14 years ago.
Okay, well, first of all, I think that a lot of sexual research is completely, I don't want to say biased, but it's not honest. Like you said, it depends on the mood of the woman, right? So
depends on the mood, on where she is in her menstrual cycle, how old she is,
how hot the guy is.
Who's asking. Exactly. Right. If she's sitting in a jacuzzi with Brad Pitt, her answer is going to be different. Right. So the whole thing is, and that's one of the things that confuses researchers, that women can't be measured the way men can. Men, you can just measure. It's really easy, even physiologically. Right. You want to know whether a man is turned on by something. Just look at his dick. Right? With a woman, what do you look at? It's hard to know what to look at. And there are devices.
Oh my God.
Are you going to lose it here?
That's funny.
What do you
look at?
There's a device called a plethal something or other, plethomillograph or something like that, which is like essentially it's a dildo. It's a small dildo that goes into the woman's vagina, and it measures
like temperature,
blood flow.
Oh, okay.
Genital blood
similar.
flow. Right. Yeah, it is temperature essentially, right? And what's interesting is that they, I think the woman's name was, she was in Montreal, I think, Meredith Chivers did this research. She showed, okay, so she hooked up men. The men's thing, it just measures whether there's an erection or not, right? And to what extent. So it's also measuring genital blood flow. So she got men and women and also both gay and straight. Right. And what she did, so you got 4 categories: gay men, gay women, straight women. I don't think there were any bisexuals in this. And she showed them a series of different videos. So some of the videos were like a heterosexual couple having sex, two gay men having sex, 2 women having sex, like a woman working out in the gym, like a hot woman, you know, all sweaty, a dude like, you know, running around the track or whatever, like a couple walking hand in hand along the beach. And then there were also videos of bonobos, like chimpanzees having sex, right? And so what they found was that the straight men were turned on by either the women or the heterosexual couples.
Straight men were turned on by the bonobos.
Straight men were turned on by what you would think, right? Just the women. Something involving a woman.
Was the bonobo wearing a wig?
No wigs. The gay men were turned on by the male sex, not interested in any of the other stuff. And also, by the way, they're watching this stuff and they're indicating on a piece of paper how turned on they are. And meanwhile, they're also having this genital blood flow being monitored, right? So it's like a lie detector, right? And then they did the same thing. So the gay women were turned on by the woman sex. The straight women were turned on by everything.
Even the bonobos.
Everything. The bonobos, the woman in the gym, the gay
but not
male,
all
gay
straight women.
female.
Not all straight women. Random different women.
The women in this
Got it. Okay.
test, right? Now, what's interesting is that meanwhile, the straight women were indicating what we would predict. They were indicating on the paper, like, no, I'm only turned on by the male female or
but the
this
video,
or that.
the tester was
but
showing
the tester showed no, they're turned on to everything. The other three groups indicated in correlation with what their blood flow showed. So what's this tell us? That women are liars? Straight women are liars? No. I think what it tells us is that
variation. There's a great deal of variation.
There's a great deal of variation, but there's also a disconnect between what a lot of women think turns them on and what actually does turn them on.
And I also think because people are giving, or women are giving their opinions and I also think sexuality is kind of a tough subject for a lot of people. And I don't want to say they're liars, but I mean, I've seen the studies on, you mentioned earlier, but they have studies on, what is the average partner, right? And for men, the average number of partners is like 5 times that the average number of women have. And I think the average number of partners a woman says that she has is 7 in a lifetime, according to the study in 2002. I can't remember. I'll have to look. And I just think, okay, half these chicks are lying. I know women who are good girls, like church girls, and, they will have sex with a guy maybe after a couple months, which is pretty long in like 2014 to wait a couple months,
right?
Not withholding for marriage. And, they're single. So they'll date a new guy every like 6 months to a year or 2 years. That's already 7 sexual partners in like a couple years.
Right.
So I feel like a lot of these women are just kind of saying what they feel people want to hear, or like you said, maybe they don't know, or they don't want to reveal. Because I think that even though we're in a modern day and age, a lot of women in general are still very uncomfortable with their sexuality.
Yeah, there was a study that actually looked at exactly what you're talking about. Again, using American undergrads, which are not representative of human beings in general.
Depending on what school, too.
Right.
Is it a party school?
But what they did was they had these men and women, and then they said, okay, they paper test, a bunch of questions, and one of the questions was, how many sexual partners have you had? And then they brought them into another room and said, okay, now we're going to do this again, but we're going to hook you up to this lie detector machine.
I love this. I love it.
And so they went through all the questions again. Turned out the men either answered accurately or higher. They exaggerated it. But generally, pretty close to accurate. And of course, this was not a lie detector test. The machine wasn't plugged in. It was just some machine and the women without the machine, they answered like 3 to 4. And with the machine, it was 7 to 8. It was like they doubled when they thought they could get caught. So there is, some scientific evidence that there's some.
There is, and I've had guys argue with me about it. I had a guy tell me, "Oh, well, I've been with all these virgins, and you're basically trying to say that I was a loose woman. Like, oh, well, you're different. I'm like, no, women talk. I've got girlfriends, even women that I know that are older. You would be surprised how many partners and how many things have been tried. A lot of people are embarrassed. They don't want to say, oh, I've tried this or I've had this amount of partners, especially women, and especially older women who grew up in a time where it was so taboo to, be with someone other than your husband.
And fair enough. And there's still lots of cultures in the world, including this one, to be honest, where a woman who's had a lot of sexual partners and is open about it, she's at risk of being ostracized, of being insulted and shamed and all that.
Why, guys? Don't you want someone who knows what she's doing?
Yeah, I know. It's a big mistake, but it's not just the guys who do it. Huh? It's other women who do it.
It is other women who do it.
That's a big problem.
That's annoying. I don't like that at all.
Yeah.
And I will never reveal my number because I can't remember. Maybe I had some of the wine.
Is it a prime number?
I don't even know. I was saving myself for marriage. Mm-hmm. I was a very good girl, and I was in love with a gentleman in high school, and we were engaged to be married, and I thought I was going to be married to him, and he was going to be my one and only, and then I lost my virginity, and he cheated on me, and I was like, well, I lost that. So I was like, because that was what I was holding on to.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, who cares now?
Right.
I feel like 2 partners or 100 partners, it's like, who cares? For me, my virginity was important to me. I couldn't get that back. So it wasn't like I was sleeping with every homeless guy in the corner, but it doesn't matter anymore. It's like, as long as I was being safe and, as long as you're safe, I don't think it matters. And
right.
If you don't get pregnant or you get an STD, really, it's like 0.
The new math.
I was one of those girls that answered 2 on the test.
So why is this podcast called Out of the Box?
Because I like to interview people with alternative and progressive thinking.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Not conventional, boring, in the box stuff.
All right.
So I like non-monogamy, and I don't think that a lot of people talk about it in an educational way. I think a lot of women or men believe that it's kind of an excuse to cheat. The person's... I also... I don't know if I believe in sex addiction either. I know that... that it's used a lot in the mainstream media for people that cheat. And I don't know that I believe in it. I just think that, maybe these men were just not honest with their significant others, or maybe, they have a lack of control, but I don't know. I don't know if I believe in it, that I think that it's a real thing. I think a lot of men use it as a scapegoat, or women, whoever is using it. I do believe in kind of love addiction, because I feel like that's more of tapping into your emotional, which is very similar to drug addiction. It's kind of the same. But I mean, maybe people do get a high from that. But I think a lot of people use it as an excuse for their lack of honesty with their urges or whatever. Have you ever...
Is that a question?
Have you dealt with sex addiction?
No, I haven't. I haven't done clinical work at all. But I tend to think, I have a friend, Stanton Peele, who's just published, I think, his 10th or 11th book about addiction. And he's sort of the main voice against the disease model of addiction. He thinks that it's not only inaccurate but harmful to think of addiction as a disease, because once you do that, you take away the power of the person to change themselves. And you say, oh, no, you have a disease.
It's genetic. Yeah. You can't control it.
You can't control it. Yeah. You could never have even one drink. You'll go crazy, And so you create this...
victimization.
Yeah, and like a spiraling out of control every time, anything happens. And he argues, he's done a lot of clinical work, and he argues that it's much better to see these things as just behavior. It's behavior. You can control it just like you can control any other behavior. Now... there are chemical responses to things. There, all sorts of hormonal surges associated with all sorts of behaviors. But when people argue like, oh, this is the love chemical, and the oxytocin, and this is the bonding chemical, and this is that chemical, that's all bullshit. Our brains are so full of chemicals. Dennis McKenna, the great ethnobotanist, said, when people talk about eliminating drugs, they don't know what they're saying. We are drugs. If you eliminate all the psychoactive chemicals in your brain right now, you would have no brain.
Well, it's proven that all the psychedelic drugs are just recreating the receptors that we already have in our brain. When if you take cocaine, it's like filling the dopamine that you already have in your brain.
Right. Yeah. The receptors are there for a reason. And some of the molecules actually exist in the brain, like DMT, for example, exists in minute quantities in the brain. And you're right. The others are very similar. MDMA is very similar to serotonin, and LSD is similar to some of the others. So the brain is designed to interact with these things. The same thing with heroin and opiates in general. Yeah. So the world is full of these things. And your brain is full of them. So to eliminate drugs, the minute you do that, there will be no more human consciousness at all.
And then we'll just all melt into A big...
Which might be the best possible thing that could happen to this planet.
Look, we're all one.
Yeah. You think that all will merge into one?
We'll just merge into one. Well, that's kind of happening already. You know, a lot of people are in interracial relationships. I think we're all going to be like a light brown in like about 100 more years.
That would be nice. That would be nice. I've got good friends who are, he's Russian and she's Congolese. So he's like whiter than white.
And she's darker than dark.
Blue-black, yeah. And they have 3 kids who are the most beautiful kids you'll ever see, you know. And it happens, Obama's a beautiful guy, you know. I see that sort of, it happens in plants. It's called hybrid vigor, right? When you get very distinct genetic groups that mix together, you get really healthy.
Well, it's because of the genetic mixing. It's like inbred people, you know, they're just mixing the same genes over and over and over again, and that's...
You end up with Prince Charles.
So we need to mix. I think the further away, the more opposites you mix together, the more yummy the kids.
Well, you notice my wife is as far from pale Irish as you can get.
So your kids won't get sunburnt.
Well, we're not having kids, but...
We're not having kids either.
Yeah, if we were... She's the color I would love to be. That's...
So why are you choosing to have kids? I'm curious. I don't want to go into my kid tangent because I think half my listeners might fall off, but I might have to.
Oh, I don't like kids.
You don't?
No, I'm just... I think kids are... there are a list of things that it's better to have friends who have them than to have them yourself.
Okay.
I would put kids in there along with yachts, ski chalets, you know, horses... You know, I'd love to have a friend who had horses, but do I want to have horses? Fuck no. Are you kidding me? No, I never wanted to have kids. I never felt any compulsion to have kids, and the reasons not to were pretty significant for me. Because, you know, I've lived an unusual kind of life where from the time I got out of college when I was about 20 until very recently, I made virtually no money. I just traveled around the world and had adventures and did odd jobs and just did whatever I felt like doing. You can't do that when you have kids. So that would have really cramped my style, you know? So I didn't have a career. I didn't have a wife. I didn't, you know, no sort of, I was living in whatever.
Were you a lone wolf?
Pretty lone, yeah. I mean, I've always had lots of friends, but they're spread all over the place. But I just, you know, in this life, I as a very young guy, I looked ahead and I said, okay, I want to be free. I want to have experiences, and lots of experiences. And having kids would have, you know, required me to pick a job, pick a career, you know, focus, live in one place. My family moved around a lot when I was a kid. I wouldn't want to, you know, keep disrupting my children's lives if possible. So, you know, and then I didn't feel like having them. So it was like, well, lots of reasons not to, no reasons to. So that was easy.
Do you think a non-monogamous lifestyle would negatively affect children? I've done a little bit of research on this, and I know that there's kind of like this fight because of the, you know, in Utah with the multiple marriages in Mormon society, and people saying that, you know, it's unhealthy for the kids, they're going to have all these mental problems. The same thing, you know, obviously with gay parents, they're going to be confused, they have 2 parents of the same sex. But there's been quite a bit of research that as long as the family unit is stable and loving and nurturing, that it doesn't matter if a kid has 5 moms or 5 dads.
Yeah, I mean, the logic, it's interesting that the argument is it's better to have 2 parents than 1 parent, because that way the kid's got 2 sources of sustenance and love and support. And if the relationship with one gets weird, there's always the other one, and there's backup and all that. But very few people take that argument and keep extending it, right? Well, then 3 must be better than 2, and 4 must be better than 3, and so on. And one of the arguments that we make in the book is that, you know, kids who grow up in the sorts of very intimate, egalitarian societies like the ones our ancestors very likely lived in, right? There's a psychological stability to that we miss, right?
It's like a giant extended family. You have a bunch of aunts and uncles and cousins and other people who love you.
And you find in those societies that the kids call every woman mother and they call every man father, even if they know who their biological mother is, because, you know, they probably do, because she breastfed them a lot more than anyone else. But still, women breastfeed one another's babies. There's not a proprietary attitude toward kids in these societies the way we assume that is human nature, right? And this is one of the big points that we make in the book, that people look at our contemporary society and the dynamics and structures that they see around them, and they suppose that those things existed forever, that those are just naturally human. Just like Koreans think it's just naturally normal human to eat dogs. And Americans think, no, it's natural to eat pigs. And you know what? It's not natural to eat crickets. And the Thais say, well, why wouldn't you eat crickets? They're everywhere. They're delicious. Right? So it's like these things that we all think are human nature are not. They're just cultural, random, arbitrary.
Social conditioning.
Yeah. So family structure is that way as well. Now, in the science, in the mainstream scientific view of humanity, including the Darwinian view of human evolution, the nuclear family is and always has been the fundamental unit. So there's always been mom, dad, kids, right? But when you actually look at the anthropological studies, as Casilda and I did in Sex at Dawn, what you find are many, many examples of societies in which that's not the most important unit. There are societies in which there are different clans, and your clan identity is much more important than who was your biological father, for example. There are societies in which your biological father has no significance whatsoever in your life, like the Mosul of southwestern China that we talk about in the book. There are other societies in the Amazon in which it's believed that a baby can have several different fathers, because a fetus is, in the understanding of these societies, a fetus is literally made of accumulated semen. So a woman who wants to have a baby who's smart and funny and good looking has lots of sex with the smart guy, the funny guy, and the good looking guy to get their essence into her fetus. Right. And then when the baby's born, each of the guys acknowledges his paternity. So it's actually, paternity is a shared activity in these societies. So this is just to say that this idea that mom, dad, child is this sort of holy triumvirate, this sacred triangular structure of all human societies, is not true at all. And once you accept that, then everything else starts to fall apart.
Well, it's not even not true. It's actually, there's a lot of scientific research that the emphasis on the nuclear family is causing a lot of destruction, because we used to be in tribal communities. There's a documentary that came out that I love, and I always promote, the Happy movie. And they were doing tests on what creates happiness. And one of the factors in people that tend to be extremely happy are large family systems. So extended aunts and uncles, having a large support system.
Right.
And also because of our modern system after, feminism, now that women are working and, expected to be mothers. So women are triple stressed, gone most of the time. There's like a babysitter raising your kid. It's not, you're not having the support system, the web that you used to have when you were in a tribe. And, that's where that cliched, saying comes, it takes a village to raise a child, because it did take a village. You can't do it by yourself, the way we're forcing mothers and fathers to do it by themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And what people need to understand is that that's not just bad for the kid, that's bad for the mom and the dad and everybody else. And so you end up perpetuating the psychological trauma. And also, now this relates back to some of the things we were talking about at the beginning, the idea of sexual exclusivity and monogamy and all that. Because if you've got a child who's raised either by a single mother, which is about half the households in the U.S. right now, or by a mother and a father, right? That child envisions the world as having one or two sources of love, of survival, essentially, right? So that kid grows up terrified of losing that source of survival, of sustenance, of emotional and nourishment of every kind. Now, you take a kid who grows up in a village where he's got 15 or 20 sources of protection and food and love and companionship and all that. That person's probably going to have a more relaxed emotional bonding style, right? Because they don't see the world as being impoverished. Yeah. Right? The world is not a place of danger and barrenness. It's a world of richness, right? If you don't love me, it doesn't matter. These other 19 people do. you know?
That's a
and
good
so
point.
look at the way that translates into our bonding in relationships, right? Now we've got, in our society, we've got this idea that you find your one and only, and that's it. That person's going to supply everything for you, whether it's sexual pleasure, friendship, take care of you in your old age, you know, remember your last words when you die, like whatever. They're going to like check every box on your list of requirements. Whereas in these other societies, all that pressure isn't on one person or one relationship, which I think makes the relationships a lot more fun, because then there's not all that responsibility and work.
And men and women are so different. You know, it's proven that men function with listening different than women do. And women are supposed to have a group of women to chit-chat with and talk, because the way women communicate is we kind of are, you know, detail-oriented, and we like to talk about all sorts of little things and go off on tangents and tell stories. And guys are very direct with their communication style in general. I'm making a huge generalization.
There's a great book about this called You Just Don't Understand by Deborah Tannen, who's a linguist who studied male and female communication styles. Yeah, it's exactly what you say. She makes a big point. Like the typical, you know, argument between a married couple or any couple is, you know, the woman comes home and she's like, "Oh, my boss is such an asshole, and he said this and he did this," and then the man listens for a few minutes and he says, "Well, why don't you try XYZ?"
And he tries to fix the problem, and the woman's head explodes.
Exactly. And the woman's like, "God damn it. Like, I don't want an answer. I just want you to listen to me." And the man's like, "Well, you know, why do I have to listen if you don't want an answer? You know, it doesn't make sense from a male perspective."
Yeah. So I think in tribal times when men were out hunting and women were out gathering, we kind of got some of our chitter chatter out. And so that wasn't put on the shoulder of a man to be the listener in that respect.
You're right.
And so I think that it's very important for women to have girlfriends, and it's helped my marriage a lot that I use my girlfriends as an outlet for my chit-chatting.
So you are married?
I am married, yes.
Oh, okay. Because you mentioned that you had a relationship that didn't work.
I had an open relationship in which, before my marriage, that was very, very... the gentleman was extremely jealous and insecure.
Right.
And he claimed that he wanted this open relationship because he actually was a chronic cheater before we were together with other women that he was with. Oh. And so I'm like this open person who I believe in, you know, non-monogamy. And so I think he thought it was going to be like his dream come true. But his issues with jealousy and being monogamous had nothing to do with a belief in non-monogamy.
Right.
It was insecurity and other things like that.
Right.
No, I'm married to a great guy, and we're kind of discovering non-monogamy. I have never believed in monogamy. I just don't. To me, it's kind of like my argument against believing in one religion. You know, people say, well, this is the true religion, this is that. My argument against believing in one religion is that, you know, you go in a very secluded area and look at the night sky, and there's 1 billion stars, and we are in the butt crack of the Milky Way solar system in the corner of the freaking universe. If your ego is so big that you think you know what the answers to the universe are, then there's no way. And it's kind of the same thing with non-monogamy. It's like there's 7 billion people on this earth. If you think you're so freaking special that there's just one person out there, well, you'll never find them because there's 7 billion plus people. There's probably at least 1 million people that could fit perfectly with you, or pretty good. I mean, 7 billion is a huge number.
Are we really in the butt crack of the Milky Way?
We are. If you look at a giant picture, I remember in my science class, there was like this giant picture of the whole universe, and then the Milky Way solar system was like in the corner, and it was like this tiny little like side, like we're in the suburbs at least.
Oh, yeah.
At least we're in the suburbs. But if you look, it was like a panographic picture of the whole universe from like this telescope, and we're kind of out there on the side.
Yeah.
Like in the ghetto corner.
Yeah. Cheap real estate.
You know, so if you look at that and at the vastness and how small we are and tiny and inconsequential in the scheme of things, even as far as the time, you know, the time or history of the earth, right? You know, our lives are like nothing. We're like a fart. In like the history.
My God, we go from a butt crack to a fart. This is going downhill.
Downhill fast.
Well, I agree with you. I was on a podcast a couple of weeks ago called The Ardent Atheist. And, you know, they were they're ardent atheists, of course. And I'm not a religious person, but I found myself defending religion there. because I think certainty is absurd.
It is absurd. And I've said that the only universal truth exists is that there is no universal truth.
Right.
That things constantly change. I know in my own life, I've said certain things and believed certain things wholeheartedly, and then something happens and I'm like, how the heck did I believe in that?
Right.
In my early 20s, or in anyone. I mean, I'm sure anyone can look at high school pictures and think, what the heck was I thinking?
Oh, yeah. I think about that every time I look at my prom picture.
And imagine that in 10 more years, 20 more years. What are we going to be looking back at, and saying, I had no effing idea what I was talking about?
Yeah, I think for better or worse, I think that's something that decelerates as you get older. I think
because you learn a little more.
Well, yeah,
you learn your life lessons.
Yeah, and I think another thing we could talk about is the sort of cultural understanding of identity and how different cultures see identity forming in different ways at different ages and all that. But I think that the difference between a 12-year-old and a 22-year-old is massive.
Yes.
Right? But the difference between a 42-year-old and a 52-year-old is maybe nothing, very little. It's another 10 years of experience. But the person, the identity of that person, unless something happens, they have a terrible car accident or they have a heart attack or they get divorced or whatever, there can be some major life event that could change them. But my sense, at least in my own experience, is that I sort of became who I am at 22, 23, somewhere in there. And I've just gotten older since then. But I'm the same person, right?
It depends on how mature the 42-year-old is.
Or how mature the 22-year-old is, in my own defense. But I don't consider myself the same person I was at 15. That was
you were totally different back then.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the same DNA or something, but a really different person. Whereas from 22, I'm 52 now, 22 to 52, I just feel like I've just more experience, but I'm the same guy.
But what about the idea that, okay, so the reason that I don't want to have kids, and we're got to wrap up soon, so this might have to get cut short, but so the reason that I don't want to have kids is because I was atheist for a while, but now I'm a religious science, which makes a lot more sense for me. But I feel that children are a spiritual way for you to take a look at yourself, right? Because children are a sponge from 0 to about 8 or 9. And, they literally just do whatever their parents do. Monkey see, monkey do. It's like the guy who says, well, my daughter was cursing. I don't know where the fuck she learned that. It's like, she learned it from you, dum-dum. And so it's a way for you to look at yourself as a mirror, right? So whether you believe in God or not, it's psychologically proven that children repeat their parents and this and that. And so it's a way for you to learn and grow about yourself. And so since I've done quite a bit of, self-searching and other things like that, and I don't feel that I need that. And I see my friends, oh my God, I'm turning into my parents. They'll say, oh my God, my daughter's just like me. And I can't, oh my God, I'm turning into my mom. So if we're regurgitating what our parents are doing and kind of just copying them, right? And then we kind of turn into our parents as we get older. Have you had that experience where you're like, oh, I'm turning into my father?
Well, maybe physically.
But you've had some psychological insight. You're not just like living the, subconscious life where you're just like, like a lot of people, they go to work, they go home, they watch TV, they don't do any introspection. They're not, reading any books about themselves or about psychology. They're just kind of wandering about. And so they turn into their parents, right? Yeah. Personality wise and physically. And so does that person change from 15 to 22 if we're unless they actually say, I'm going to change, I'm going to become a different person, I'm going to work on myself, I'm going to break the cycle of, maybe my dad was an alcoholic or I grew up in an unhealthy household. Are they different unless they do that work?
No, wait, what's this have to do with you not having kids? Weren't you going there? With
I already said that.
Oh, you
see, I was communicating
you don't want to have those mirrors? Is that what you're saying?
I feel like I've already done that.
Oh, okay. So you don't need that.
I don't need this
function.
This spiritual, because I really do think that's, with all of my friends that have kids, I've seen that's the purpose, right? Is that to me, is that they're seeing a reflection of themselves.
I think people have kids. A lot of people have kids for the wrong reasons. I think people have kids for very selfish reasons often. A lot of people say, well, I want to have the experience of having a kid. That's not the reason to have a kid. I mean, I think it's like people say, well, I want to have a dog. Okay. And, if you live in a little apartment in the city, you can get a small dog. But don't get a big dog. Don't get a dog that needs to run, or I want to have a horse. Well, if you don't have a farm, don't get a damn horse, But I want the experience of having a horse. Well, fuck you, right? You don't get to have that experience just because you feel like it. But strangely, with kids, people do. Like, I want to have kids. Okay, well, no one can stop you.
I'm not saying that these people are consciously choosing to have kids as a spiritual reflection of themselves.
Right.
I'm saying that's the result.
Right.
And I've seen it in all of my friends who have kids with them saying, oh, crap, I'm teaching my kid XYZ and I didn't mean to because they didn't repair the damage.
Right.
So say,
but isn't that a spur to repair the damage then? Because they say, like someone who smokes cigarettes, right? Like sometimes they'll have kids and they'll be like, okay, I can't smoke cigarettes around my kids. That I cannot do that. And so it gives them the reason to stop. To take control because they don't want to pass that on to their kids.
Oh, I don't think a lot of people know about this whole spiritual... This is my theory. I don't think a lot of people know about this whole spiritual mirror thing. It just happens as a natural process of having kids. They realize that they're teaching things. And some people don't realize that they're teaching things. A lot of people do not realize... I know so many people who complain about their kids and say, well, I don't know where they get this from, or I don't know, they must get... A lot of people actually use it to enable their blaming and victimization. Oh, they're learning from their dad, not me.
Oh, that's a lovely dynamic. Yeah. Love that. The divorced parent dynamic.
Yeah. Well, I don't know where he or she got X, Y, or Z. It's not for me, even though you see that trait in your friend quite clearly.
Yeah.
So... I completely lost my point. I was saying that, but okay. So my point was, see, I'm communicating like a woman. There's no point.
What I can't understand is how so many women are able to talk and listen at the same time. I can't do that. It's amazing. If I'm at a table with 4 women, they're all talking at the same time. And
you're sure they're all listening?
Well, they do. And in Spain, I live in Spain for 20 some years. And Spanish people can do it, men and women. It's amazing to sit at a table with like 10 Spanish people, and they're all talking and listening simultaneously.
They're socially conditioned.
They're amazing, wonderful people, but I can't keep up.
Yeah. So my original question to you, after all my tangent, was: so you're saying that from 15 to 22, there's a great difference between that and 42 and 52. My point is there a difference at all unless the person consciously says, hey, I'm going to work on myself? Because otherwise you're kind of just your parents, another carbon copy.
Well, I think there are physiological changes and sort of life experience changes that happen between 15 and 20 or 25 or whatever that are unavoidable. But once you've had those experiences, you've had your first love, you've had your, whatever, you're shaving, your body sort of, it's like the body, right? Like, I basically have the same body I had when I was 22. It's just older, right? But I don't have the same body I had when I was 15. I don't have zits and braces and, I don't weigh 130 pounds. So I think for me, it's kind of like that psychologically. And I'm not saying everybody's like that, but I think... in North American Indian societies, there is this notion, the closing of the hoop, which is that when a child is born, there's sort of like a broken circle. And so there's a gap, there's an opening in the circle. And as they mature, the two ends of that circle come closer and closer to each other. And then when they finally close, that's the closing of the hoop. And what it means is from that moment on, this person is no longer a child because they can defend themselves. As long as there's a gap, somebody can get through that gap and hurt them really badly psychologically. But once that gap is closed, then the person is mature, even though they're still 13, 14 years old or whatever. And at that point, the hoop expands, right? So it takes the form of a circle, and that's the beginning of maturity. And then the process of maturity is expanding that circle. So to me, that sort of makes sense. And I think that's something that's really missing in Western society, is that we don't have this very clear sense of when childhood ends and adulthood begins.
There also were a lot of Native American ceremonies. There was one where they would kidnap your son in the middle of the night at like, I think 12 or 13. He would go out hunting. I forgot what tribe this was. So I'll have to Google it. And it was like he had to like survive, and it was like his indoctrination into manhood.
Well, there are a lot of spirit quest indoctrinations in lots of different tribes. I'm not aware of any where the son was kidnapped, but when the boy was ready, and also girls in some of these societies, they would go out and fast alone. They would take them to a certain point and say, okay, we'll be here in 4 or 5 days, and they would leave them there and they would fast. Others use peyote or hallucinogenic mushrooms to aid the process. Yeah, ayahuasca is limited to the Amazon basin. Yeah.
Ayahuasca.
Are you an ayahuasca aficionado?
I'm not. I'm going to have my first time in the next few months. I'm waiting to hear back from are you handing me an ayahuasca?
No.
A card to an ayahuasca shaman. So we need to wrap up, Chris. Are you promoting anything else? Twitter?
On Twitter, I'm Chris Ryan PhD. My website is chrisryanphd.com. I have a podcast called Tangentially Speaking, which is on iTunes and Stitcher and on my site as well.
Thank you so much for visiting us at Out of the Box Podcast. Guys, please go on outoftheboxpodcast.com and click on the donate button. We need more donations to help this podcast keep going on and on and on, and me bringing you amazing, interesting, and fun guests. Thank you so much, and don't forget to subscribe on iTunes and Stitcher.